Hi, I'm Anatole, and this is my review of Violet Evergarden Season 1, Episode number 9, titled Violet Evergarden. And I think it's significant. This is the self-titled episode, the first episode that's given the title of the series, because it ties in with the plot. It's a very significant moment for Violet in this episode, and I'm quite eager to give my review of it. So before I get into my thoughts on the episode, I do want to say that I'm slowly but surely making my way to the end of the series. It's taken me much longer than I anticipated. And as I've explained before, I had a long hiatus because of eye problems and ear problems, and both of those have finally subsided. So I'm almost back to situation normal after a year. Oh, it took a long time. So hopefully I can get this process down where I can get these videos out much faster than I have been doing. Now that I've kind of given my brief introduction to the channel background and given the title of the episode, I traditionally also give the review that it's scored on IMDb. And I have that open on my Kindle Fire right here. And the score for episode number 9 out, I'm not sure how many total votes, but the score is 9.2. Ooh, quite a high score. I believe it's one of the highest in the series so far from imdb.com. And the total number of users that were scoring that were 610. Let's get into the synopsis of the episode. Violet attempts to carry a wounded Gilbert to safety, but is shot and hit with a grenade in the process, resulting in the loss of both of her arms. So that's basically, we learn circumstances in which she earned her great disability that turned her into this sort of steampunk cyborg. Gilbert tells Violet to leave without him, and finally tells her that he loves her. But she doesn't understand his words, because she doesn't understand love at that point, and maybe doesn't understand it until this episode, really. Defeated, the enemy bombs their own headquarters, and Gilbert sacrifices his life to push Violet to safety. In the present, Violet returns to the battle site to search for Gilbert. Hodgins then arrives and tells her that Gilbert has entrusted her care to him in case anything happened to him being Gilbert. Violet returns to the post office with Hodgins, but refuses to do any more ghostwriting work, worrying her co-workers. In her grief, Violet attempts to commit suicide, but cannot go through with it. And I have a special note about this, and I'll save that to my end comments on the episode. After helping Benedict deliver letters and reading a letter sent to her by Erica and Iris, Violet comes to realize that the act of receiving a letter can bring someone joy. And this is kind of the It's a Wonderful Life section of the episode. We get a montage of all the people that she has affected, and she understands and she appreciates the value she has now, not as a warrior, but as a facilitator for others through the tool of language. And so her arms are no longer the tool of destruction, but a tool of understanding. And that ties in, this awareness of her new role ties into her developing empathy, something that she had lacked. She returns to work, starting with ghostwriting a letter for Spencer. Lucilia, I know I'm saying that wrong. Lucilia, C-U, cucumber, Q, Luculia? I believe that would be pronounced Luculia's brother. Violet returns to the post office and asks Hodgins if it is really okay for a person like her to live on. Hodgins responds, because she has so much blood on her hands, Hodgins responds that what she had done in the war can never be undone, but that also applies to all the good deeds she has done as an auto-memory stall. And in some ways, that is the plight of all the returning soldiers who have done things in the war that they would never do in peacetime. How do they bridge that gap between their peacetime person and their wartime person? Because they're not the same. And the peacetime person has to carry that burden of the actions the wartime person committed. Are they the same? Can there be any sort of reconciliation between the light and the dark within that person? So that is the plot summary. Now to kind of give my brief thoughts on the episode. I thought it was interesting. We had that cold open with Majors shooting over the opening credits, and I thought it was quite nice to begin with a cold open and then dramatically cut from that into the opening sequence, the opening credit scene. The acting, I'm still not pleased with the acting. It feels quite mannered and wooden, and I think that's a fault in most anime. And this whole question of is there any good acting in anime that I've been posing throughout my reviews of this series has led me to wonder, is there any good acting in animation? And I can find a few examples, but they seem to be special cases. So I think even in Western animation, especially because most Western animation is directed either towards children, or if there's an adult audience that's comedy related, acting is not part of the purview of that series. And so the few that I can think of, and I've thought of one also for anime, tend to be special series and the exceptions to the rules. So I have Persepolis, the adaptation of the graphic novel, which is more of a prestige film and less of an animated film, although it is definitely an animated film. But I think that the goals and where it came from are not from the usual origin of an animated series. And so I think that leads to the reason why the acting in that is more naturalistic and less mannered or comedic. I thought of BoJack Horseman, even though it is very much a comedy, a dark comedy. The reason why that series is so special, there are the moments, the character moments, that are very dark and come from the behavior of the characters and not aimed only for the punchline. And in those moments, the actors have to be quite serious and respond with. They have to not only understand the motivation of the character, they have to be able to personify that in their behavior and not only looking for a cheap laugh. And there are plenty of cheap laughs in BoJack Horseman, but if you get to the end of the series, and I'm wording this in a way not to spoil it for anyone who's ever watched it, there's a very, very nostalgic and sad scene at the end in that last episode that is as real as anything you could find in a dramatic series. Even though it's still peppered with humor, the whole scene is not played as a comedic scene. And I have Scanner Darkly, which was the adaptation of the Philip K. Dick, the rotoscoped animated film, the adaptation of the Philip K. Dick novel with Robert Downey Jr. and Woody Harrelson. That is played very naturalistic. And then the anime film that I have listed is very much an exception to the rule, in that it was attempted to be a blend of Western and Eastern styles, and that is Tekkon Kinkreed, directed by the Western special effects supervisor, who later then got involved in anime, and that is Michael Arias. And there are moments in that are quite very naturalistic acting performances. So yes, it can happen, it does exist, but for the most part, it's not evident, it's not called for, it's not a value within the series that are produced. And even though this is a prestige series, this series, Violet Evergarden, and it's not a routine genre piece, because even when there are action scenes, again and again we return to these character moments, that makes it a character piece. So because the characters have such a prominent role within the storytelling, it's already an exception to the rule. Anything that's character driven is an exception to the rule. Genre is usually the predominant mode of expression within most of these commercial forms. Even though it's a character driven piece, the acting is not naturalistic, and I think that's why it bothers me, why I keep returning to it so much. This is a character driven story. The acting should reflect that, and it does not. It's still very mannered, and it's one of the faults I have for the series. The opening scene ends with Violet asking what love is, reiterating one of the main themes, and that is, what is love? What makes love? When are we aware of love? What level of empathy do we need to have to understand love? And when we understand love, does that imply empathy? She has not lost the major, not really. Reddit again and again returns to speculation that the major is still alive, that we're getting these breadcrumbs. We never see the final dead body. We get hints within the dialogue, one being in this episode, she hasn't lost the major, not really, that the major is still alive. Her hands, when she attempts to commit suicide, her hands don't strangulate. And so I think that is the biggest sign we have now that she has real empathy, because she has failed as a killer, and in failing as a killer, she has succeeded as a human, because now that cold mechanical part of her is failing, because the warm, the empathetic part of her is succeeding, preventing her from committing that the final act of suicide. Her killer instinct is tamed because her nurturing instinct is too strong now to allow that to take over. I really like the art style in the series. It's overexposed because the light, it's always going for this sun-drenched look, and so all the scenes are undersaturated, overexposed. It gives a very old-timey photographic feel that I think helps us feel like we are transported to the time period, that sort of vague European in between 100 Years' War and World War I, closer to World War I, but that sort of Bismarck era of Europe. And see, the orange and the green, the city is red, orange, and green with sparing use of blue, and so this makes Violet's blue eyes really stand out because the use of blue is so restrained. And that was it that I had that was all I had for the notes. So now that we come to the end of my review, I'm excited that we're getting close to the end. We're going to see where this thread of the major is finally going to lead us. We've had the self-titled episode because Violet has become a person. I think that's what that is supposed to imply. She understands what love is. Her empathy is now fully activated. And we have 9, 10, 11, 12, about 4 episodes to go. So the final third, the final act more or less of the series. And hopefully all the setup that the middle episodes were doing with character development, and then this flashback sequence about what happened with the death of the major, all that setup is gone. We've got to the point where we can, of developing the most important character of Violet, that should lead us into that final act. And so I hope you'll join me as I go into the ending, the end part of Violet Evergarden, last 4 episodes. Thank you for being here up till now, and I hope everything is well for you. Otherwise, till next time, take care and be well. Goodbye.